So before we get to the confession, the more observant amongst you may have picked up on a few hints that we've been dropping recently about some exciting podcast news. I can reveal that moments ago, Sister Holly pinned this announcement to the parish notice board, which is in the vestibule, as you know.
Simon Mayo's Confessions.
And the podcast is back. You've been asking for it for a long time.
Yes, you have.
And so we're going to do all of that. So all of the confessions of the week, classic confessions from the crypt, bonus confessions from the folder, which Holly keeps called Not for Broadcast.
Hello.
And your emails for the parish notice board. The first episode is landing this Friday on all good podcast platforms. You can like, subscribe or follow now, whatever your chosen podcast platform requires. Just search for Simon Mayo's Confessions and make sure that you get the new one, not the old one.
Not that one, no.
Because that doesn't get updated. Send your confessions and correspondence, please, to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk, and we'll have enough of the Mozart, and we'll move on with some Albinoni.
Of course.
Little kind of classical segue.
Yeah.
Yes.
There. So a brand new episode of Simon Mayo's Confessions podcast this Friday and every Friday, well, most Fridays. Lots of stuff, all very exciting. So you can go to where you get your podcasts, look for it, and you can subscribe, and then everything will happen like clockwork.
Yes, it will.
He says confidently, because Holly's in charge. So today's confession, and which will be included, of course, in our lovely new podcast, comes from Julie. Julie, thank you very much indeed for this tale. It gets a little bit racy.
Does it?
Father Simon and your wonderful crew, my name is Julie, and in the 1990s, I was the admin manager for a local government admin team. Some 15 mainly female staff, but we had one male admin, who I will call Nobby. Nobby thought he was wonderful, and never failed to tell everyone that he was wonderful and that he could do my job far better than I could. He never failed to point this out. Also, he was a total pain in the posterior, to be honest. I'm sure many of your listeners will be nodding knowingly. We've all worked with someone like entitled Nobby. Someone who is always better than you. Someone who instinctively feels superior to all his and her other colleagues. This might be a cue for Brother Matthew's class war rant.
Yeah.
But we shall see. It was one of entitled Nobby's tasks to complete the stationery order, and being so wonderful, failed to check it, often making many mistakes. On this particular day, I checked the order, unknown to him, and noticed that he had ordered 20 boxes of black bin bags instead of 2 boxes of black bin bags by writing in the wrong column. I decided to teach him a lesson. The full order arrived the next day, and they would not take the extra boxes away. So poor old entitled Nobby had to haul them into the store. And while he was doing this, the girls in the office were organising a bin bag fashion show, and some were really good. When entitled Nobby came back upstairs to the office, we were all attired in bin bags, all accessorised, which we paraded during our morning break. Poor old Nobby. Thought none of us. At lunchtime, he stomped out of the office to meet his wife for lunch. One of the admin people was called Jane, and Jane was friends with Nobby's wife, and said they'd been arguing a lot lately, and his wife wasn't a happy bunny, as Nobby wasn't doing his fair share of childcare duties. Always the sign of a shocker. A cunning plan occurred to me. Entitled Nobby cheered up considerably that afternoon when he received a phone call from his wife. He said he was on a promise.
Right.
Old-fashioned terminology. I'm not even going to explain this to Holly.
We're definitely not.
Do you know what it means?
No.
Well, you can probably guess.
I'll just...
His wife was promising.
Yeah, no
Right,
need
okay.
to...
He said he was on a promise.
Yeah.
I haven't heard that phrase for so long. And she wanted to make it up to him, as she'd obviously been in the wrong and felt very bad. The next morning, he stormed into my office and demanded to know if I had contacted his wife and put her up to it. I replied I had not contacted his wife, and what was he on about? It seems she had been very loving and told him to go into the bedroom to get ready. In excited anticipation, he watched as she called his name from outside the door, and then a bare leg, sexily wrapped around the slightly open door, and then a thigh covered in a very sexy, you might have guessed it, bin liner.
Oh,
no.
Who knew that bin liners could be made to replicate foxy undergarments? Corsets? Yes. Suspenders? Kind of.
No.
Nice try. Thongs? Rather disappointing, apparently, and also unhygienic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, Nobby didn't see the funny side and stomped off to sleep in the spare room in a sulk. Whilst his wife enjoyed the laugh at his expense and a bigger bed. Beg forgiveness for enjoying this much too much and for not owning up to contacting his wife, because I did, but technically I didn't. I just supplied the bin liners. Entitled Nobby never made a mistake with a stationery order ever again. Cloud, silver lining. P.S. I even paid for the bin liners, so it was actually worth it. Anyway, and I think everything is going to be fine and dandy, but you never know because Sister Holly always has to look at this from a very official point of view because she's speaking on behalf of the network or something.
Right. This was a bit much for me. I'm going to be honest, it was a bit much for me, this confession. Just the leg wrapping around the door. It was just a bit much for me.
Corsets and suspenders.
Good, yeah.
But then in the bin bag, it was petty. And I understand that Nobby was not a nice man, and I get it, but I think this was a step too far. Getting involved in the bedroom shenanigans, it's a bit personal and a bit much, and that's why I'm not going to forgive.
I love it when you're disapproving. Excellent. Which is every day. Brother from another gutter.
What a way to kick off the new podcast with something as saucy as this. I'm all in favour. Bit of bedroom shenanigans, why not, Holly? Quite right. I didn't have much attention to detail, did he, Nobby, with putting the wrong number in the wrong columns? So really, had it coming? Probably. Yes, he did. And also he got the bed to himself and Nobby's wife got the bed to herself as well. So that worked out well. And they found a use for the bin bags. So for that reason, I choose to forgive.
Bin bag suspenders. Who'd have thought that such a thing was even possible?
In a thong.
Anyway, to the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Julie for her prank? Unlike Sister Holly, but maybe you'll be like Brother Matt. Let us know on the text, please, for the people's verdict. 61054. First word has to be Simon. Tonight's confession, by the way, the Confessions podcast will be with you at the end of this week. You can subscribe wherever you get your podcast, just thought I'd mention that again. Today's confession came from Julie. A story from her local government admin days and entitled Nobby, who she worked with, the only bloke in the office who thought he was great but actually was rubbish. Messed up the stationery order, ordered 20 boxes of bin bags rather than 2. So the women in the office put on a big bag fashion show and his wife put on a foxy undergarment show with apparently great hilarity.
Yes.
Eventually, back in the office. Forgiveness or no? Let's see what the people's verdict says.
So Tim from Sutton says, is this a case to forgive? Course it is. Absolutely no harm done. Michelle says, absolutely forgiven. The saga of the sexy black bin liner is going to keep us amused for a long time. And Kevin says, forgiven. Had me snorting into my orange juice. Every cloud has a silver liner, and they've been there and done it.
Well, that's clearly quite enough of that kind of thing. Matt's way too encouraged to carry on his pun activity. If you have a confession, send it, and if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Well, it's 5:45. Yesterday, we told you that the Confessions podcast is returning. It will be there for you every single Friday. What a treat that's going to be. There's going to be all the stuff of the week, all the stories of the week, plus the ones that we can't normally broadcast because of the decency rules and regulations.
Oh dear.
All kinds of things. So don't forget to pick up wherever you get your podcasts from Friday. Look for our Confessions podcast. Make sure you get the brand new one as opposed to the old one, which is still hanging around. Word of advice there. Okay, so here we go with today's confession, which comes from Harry. Harry, thank you very much indeed for getting in touch. Simon, Matt, Holly, and the rest of the team. Here is a confession of mine that I need to divulge to clear my conscience. I was a fresh-faced 16-year-old apprentice at a dealership garage, and as such had all the good jobs, sweeping up, emptying the bins, making the tea, and doing all the go and get me a donut runs, because they all spoke as though they were in slow horses.
Gonna guess,
it was pretty rubbish, to be perfectly honest. Now, one of the jobs was to clean out the snack room fridge. I mean, there you go. There's a top job. So this was supposed to be done on a weekly basis, but I very much doubted if it had been done for the last 6 months from when the said fridge was purchased. Still, I'm not sure anybody actually cleaned it ever, so you can imagine that I was met with a few choice aromas and new forms of life growing in sandwich bags. I totally blitzed the fridge with copious amounts of bleach and cleaning agents, and it came up a treat, Father Sam. And I even pulled it out and hoovered behind, sucking up an old receipt and a lot of crumbs. I was very pleased with myself, and I asked the boss to have a look, and he was also very pleased, and he treated me to a chippy lunch for a good job well done, and he let me off early as it was a Friday. Job's a good one, as someone once said. So come Monday, and all was good until lunch, when one chap said his lunch was warm. Further investigation led to the warm fridge that was definitely not cold at all. The dial was set to maximum cold, but it was undoubtedly a warm fridge. No problem, said the boss. It's only 6 months old. We can return it. I'll get the receipt from admin. Well, after a lot of raised voices and looking through various folders, it was obvious admin couldn't find the receipt at all. And yes, this was the receipt that I had sucked up with the vacuum the previous week. Admin had taped the receipt to the back of the fridge in a little envelope, which is quite a smart move. But I had hoovered it up and it had been thrown away. So a new fridge was purchased and put in place of the old one, and the old one was carried by myself and the other apprentice and placed out the back. And this is when I had a good look at the fridge, and I realised that the dial was kind of not on properly. I'd obviously pulled the knob off when the cloth I had been using to clean the fridge had got caught on it, and I yanked it and it sort of came off just a little bit.
Yeah.
So good thump, and it was on properly. I ran an extension out to it and I plugged it in. An hour or two later, voila, it was lovely and cold. There you go, cold fridge. But oh dear, it was all my fault, and I got the admin yelled at because they'd lost the receipt. And they had to buy a new one, the admin people, see?
Oh, right.
Now, it's already bad enough, but I knew that my brother had just moved into his first flat and needed appliances. I therefore sold him the fridge for 40 quid. As he came to pick me up, and he picked me up at the fridge. So I actually profited from my own mistake.
Yeah.
Dearest and ever forgiving collective, I seek your forgiveness from the admin who got shouted at, and from my boss who unnecessarily purchased a new fridge that I had broken anyway. And I profited, and I shouldn't have, and I throw myself humbly at your mercy. Yours sincerely, Harry. Hang on a second. Oh, it was a soft one. I thought that was going to be the hard one, but that was actually the soft one. Anyway, okay, so we need a little bit of a
crossfade there. Wow.
Do you think
great.
that's what? Do you think that's what was
Silly
needed?
boxing gloves there.
Thank you very much. I was just concentrating on making sure that the next record was going to be slightly longer than the one that's planned.
Oh, right. Wait for the verdicts.
Yeah, that's right. Anyway, Sister Holly, take your time.
Well, Matt and I have lots to say, really. Well, the thing is, I was starting to feel sorry for Harry, really, in all of this. I was thinking, gosh, it wasn't his fault that he, sucked up the receipt in the vacuum, but it was the selling the fridge to the brother that I wasn't impressed with.
Is that
right? He sold it for 40 quid, which is a lot of money to take off your own sibling. I thought that was really quite poor. I mean, giving it to his brother would also have been bad, but slightly less bad. And also, he should have just really come clean. The poor admin staff, they did their job. They taped the receipt to the back of the fridge. They did what they had to do. And so really, Harry should have come forward, and he shouldn't have sold the fridge to his brother. So all in all, not forgiving at all.
To be honest, that's actually quite a useful thing. If you buy an appliance, keep the receipt and sellotape it to the back of it, rather than keep it in a file which you're going to lose.
But what if you hoover it up because you're being really tidy and clean like Harry?
Yeah, okay. Anyway, but he did flog it to his brother for 40 quid.
He did. I mean, I'm going to say 40 quid for a second-hand fridge, that feels pretty steep. Really, isn't the onus on the brother to try and get a better deal for the second-hand fridge? It's not Harry's fault that his brother hasn't worked out that it's too much to pay for a second-hand fridge. Also, who tapes their receipts to the back of their fridges? No one does.
No, but
the reason you've never heard of it is because it doesn't work. Because when you're looking for your receipt, when you've got a problem with your fridge, you don't look behind the fridge. What you do is you go go to your accordion file that's got all the receipts for all of the white goods in your house, and there it is, ready to go, and you just ring up
Okay,
white
that's
goods.
where we leave Matt's admin assistance tips. I don't think we need any more. But we do need the people's verdicts, but that's very interesting filing information. Top anecdote, I think. Do you forgive Harry for making money out of his own mistake? That's the issue. 61054. First word is Simon. Before the news, Tuesday will continue in a moment. We had a confession from Harry, who had a rubbish job, one of which, when he was working at this dealership, he cleaned the fridge. In the process of cleaning it, he broke it. Then when he mended it, he sold it. Admin got shouted at and he made a lot of money. Anyway, the verdict is in. Here it comes.
So Rachel says, forgiven. Harry was trying to do the right thing. Not his fault that admin wasn't run by a Mr. M. Williams with his accordion files.
Very clever.
Forgiven, says Alex from Cambridgeshire. Ad hoc fridge selling seems to be a thing. My dad was once hauling one into his granddad's flat. A random bloke offered him cash for it, despite the fact that he was obviously installing it, and he didn't take the offer. And finally, Dave in accounts says, forgiven. Taping receipts to assets. This is the sort of lunacy that ensues when you trust admin to do an accounts job.
I think he knows
Yes.
what he's talking about.
Yeah.
If you have a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. And as from this week, of course, your confession will be immortalised
Oh, yeah.
in the Confessions podcast. 5:46. So let's play the tune here. That's very good and nicely done. Nicely sequenced, I think. Don't
Yeah, I thought
forget
so.
the important Confessions news that on Friday, that's when you can get the first Confessions podcast.
Oh,
Yes.
finally.
It's back. All kicking, all glamour, bells and whistles, lots of confessions. The ones of the week, one from the archive, interesting tales, the ones that we shouldn't really have broadcast.
Yeah. Saucy.
Wherever, well, I don't know, it depends what gets sent
I
in.
mean,
Yeah.
Basically,
Yeah.
So wherever you get your podcast, that's where you can get the Simon Mayo Confessions podcast. You can register, sign up, and it's all fine and available and free, of course. Tonight's confession comes from Nick. He signed it Nick in some other county. Simon and team, I'll set the scene for you if you like. Well, yes, it would be helpful. It's the early 1990s, and I'm in my 20s. In those days, it wasn't overkill on health and safety, you know, and a car driver's license meant that you could get straight into a 7.5-ton lorry and drive. This is relevant to the story.
Okay.
I was at a loose end, I guess you'd say, and went to work for the family business as a parcel delivery driver / mechanic / pallet collection delivery guy. Basically, do anything.
Yeah.
So after doing my daytime duties, I was called upon to do a small night shift job every now and again. So the fateful night arrives and I drove about an hour from our yard in a 7.5-ton lorry to the depot to collect the next day's pallets and parcels. Got into the yard. I was early, the first vehicle to be loaded. I thought, get loaded quickly, have a snooze in the lay-by for an hour, turn up at the yard before anyone else. Brilliant plan. We were easily pleased in the 1990s. That sounded like a good day.
Yes.
I walked into the warehouse, and there were the parcels and the boxes and the pallets everywhere. There was no one around. I walked to where the noise was coming from, and all the staff were drinking tea, smoking fags, and playing cards on a tea break. It's back in the day.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When was the last time you had a tea break, Holly? See, it doesn't really happen now.
No, not
Just have a
really.
tea at your desk. I asked to be loaded, and I was grunted at. You can load yourself, mate.
Oh, fortunately, we're in
Wow.
that part of the world, aren't
They
we?
Is it
all-
Roy Winston?
It could have been. I explained that I didn't have a forklift license, and I wasn't very good. But needless to say, nobody cared, and no one got up to help me. So I went into the collection centre and saw what I had to get onto the lorry. Well, Father Simon, it started off really well. At the beginning, I was there, I was picking up the pallets and picking up the parcels off the floor and loading them into the lorry, and I was doing it very well, and I was very pleased with myself. Until I came across an IBC, which sounds like a missile, but it's not. It's an intermediate bulk container. And it's a large 1,000-litre fluid container inside a metal cage on a pallet. So that's 1,000 litres of fluid.
Right.
Well, Simon, I'd never encountered one of these before. And whilst it didn't look like a pallet at the bottom, it had slots where the forks and the forklift truck would go. and then I could lift it up. So the problem was, on this pallet there were 3 slots, but I didn't know which of the slots to use. It was, apparently I learnt later, going to a local golf course, and inside was 1,000 litres of green dye to dye the grass.
Oh no.
I know you're ahead of me. I attempted to pick up the pallet, and as I did, I hit something on the bottom of the pallet. Thinking that I was doing the right thing, I kept pushing. All of a sudden, I could see green dye dripping onto the floor. And then the drip became a gush. And then the gush became a flood, and literally everything turned green. It flooded the depot floor, soaking every box inside. It was actually a very nice shade of green, somewhere between, if you check with a well-known high-end paint company, breakfast room green and Danish lawn green with a hint of teal. But
Nice.
it didn't just stop. It just kept on going, and it soaked everything, and then it went into the next box, and I ran into the tea room, and they were still laughing and joking and playing cards and smoking number 6, but I explained that I was loaded and I couldn't get the last pallet onto the lorry. I said I'd be back later. They weren't interested. I made a sharp exit, hot-footed it out of there, never to return. Funny enough, they never asked me to do the run ever again. But I think I made my mark. So therefore I need to ask forgiveness for the staff at the parcel delivery depot. But I do also particularly ask to all of those customers that had their parcels soaked in green dye, and to the people that ended up with green hands that wouldn't wash off. But at least it was close to breakfast room green and Danish lawn green with a hint of teal. So that it looked pretty classy. And also, looking on the bright side, it might have covered up their nicotine-stained fingers. Because remember that kid, smoking is very bad for you.
Yeah, don't
It's
do it.
early 90s,
Yes.
different times.
Yes.
Everyone used to be smoking back in the day.
Yeah, well, yes.
Anyway, Nick in some other county wishes forgiveness for basically letting loose 1,000 litres of green dye and staining everything inside. What do you say, Sister Holly?
Well, it was a disaster waiting to happen, really. Driving a forklift truck, well, not truck, the lorry, whatever it is.
Yes, the
I don't
forklift,
know.
yeah.
I don't do these things. And so, really, that was stupid. That really was stupid. If you've never done it before, then don't do it, because it's a disaster waiting to happen. Everything went
didn't
green.
wanna do it. He didn't wanna do it, though.
Yeah, and then he did it, and then he just sort of snuck away. He
did.
didn't actually own up and say, this was all my fault, guys. And it's been really bad. He just snuck away, and that's not very good. And so that's why I'm not going to forgive.
However, one would imagine a different reaction from Brother Matthew.
Yeah, you would, because, I mean, at least he had a go, didn't he? Had a go. Can I operate the forklift? Turns out, no, I can't, because I haven't been trained. But also, I would argue, what were all those lot doing with the tea break? Nobody's lifting a finger, but now they're going to have to lift a
having a fag,
nicotine-stained finger. That's what they're going to have to lift now, and work out all of the damage caused, because they were too lazy on the tea breaks and the capstan full strength. So for that
They were
reason,
addicted.
I'm going to forgive.
So it's the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Nick for today's forklift truck 1,000 litres of green dye confession? On the text, please, 61054. You start your message with Simon. You can email simon@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Verdict, here we come.
So easy to forgive this, says Tommy. You have to remember, health and safety was very different in the early 90s, and no one would have batted an eyelid at him moving the forklift without experience. Hannah says, forgiven. I had no idea that they dyed the grass at golf clubs. That's ridiculous. All their own fault. And Jerry says, I'm with Brother Matt
Is
on
that
this
right?
one. The tea-drinking smokers didn't care less. I'd have loved to have seen their faces when they saw the damage. In fact, I'm green with envy.
Well, average. If you have a confession, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. The podcast available tomorrow. Was that you?
Just dropping everything.
Okay, that's fine. As people do, of course, when Confessions comes on the radio.
very
And,
smooth.
if you miss any, from tomorrow, the new Confessions podcast will be there. All singing, all dancing.
Yeah.
Confessions from the Crypt. Stuff that we couldn't broadcast for various reasons, producer guidelines, that kind of thing. So that'll be the brand new Confessions podcast with you tomorrow. You can subscribe already. You can say how much you like it, even though you've never heard it. That sounds dishonest, but I think it's acceptable.
It's okay.
Yeah.
I
Under
forgive.
these
5-star.
circumstances, we'll forgive you. Today's confession comes from Mitch. All right, Mitch. Simon and the Collective. This confession goes back around 15 years ago when I was living in the Irish Republic. To set the scene, I have type 1 diabetes and as such require regular eye screening, only carried out some 50 miles away in Dublin as a preventative measure against some of the complications associated with this condition. The screening process involves eye drops to dilate the pupils fully to enable a good digital image of the back of the eye. The downside of this is that I can't drive for 8 hours afterwards as it leaves my vision impaired. Many people have had similar drops and will know what Mitch, not his real name, is talking about. So for this particular early morning screening appointment in the late noughties, I got the train to Dublin the night before and stopped in a modestly priced €40 B&B with threadbare carpets and probable wildlife in the bedsheets. Rising from my slumber in the morning, I put on yesterday's clothes consisting of tatty jeans, runners with holes in, and a t-shirt that may have had some spilt beer on it from the night before. Oh, and I didn't have a shave as I travelled light. I travelled light, just like Jack Reacher, but not really like Jack Reacher.
Yeah.
But he's travelling light. We get the idea. After all, I was only there for an eye screening appointment, not a job interview or court appearance. I was more Claude Greengrass than the Paris or Milan catwalks. This is a reference to a character played by Bill Maynard in the TV series. I'm just explaining for Holly.
Thank you.
yes.
Yeah.
The TV series Heartbeat, and he was very much kind of run down and scruffy.
Okay, cool.
All right. Okay, so that's what he's looking like.
Right.
Just to explain. It's complicated business. During the screening, I agreed to undergo a new additional process which involved an injection of I should have said, if you're a bit squeamish.
Literally the start of the sentence before the warning.
Yes.
Yeah.
Additional process which involved an injection of a dye into my blood, which would highlight any current leakage from blood vessels in the back of my eyes. A side effect of this is that it would make my skin appear discoloured, maybe a bit grubby. Well, after the appointment, I was advised to go somewhere dark for a bit and take on plenty of fluids to help flush out some of the dye from my system. Fortunately, Dublin is full of dark places where you can take on plenty of fluids. They're called pubs. So I got on the outside of a few good cold ones and then headed for Connolly Station, where I had about 90-minute wait for my train home. Normally, when faced with the wait of this duration, I would read a book or do some crossword puzzles, but as my eyesight was still impaired, this wasn't possible. So I got a cup of tea from the shop and I drank it sitting on the steps of the station, after which a combination of the earlier alcohol consumption and the boredom took its toll and I nodded off. The next thing I knew, I was being awoken by a Garda officer, a police officer, asking me to move on, which I thought was strange and unfair. However, with shock, I discovered that my empty paper teacup was now overflowing in small change, left no doubt by the kind-hearted commuters of Dublin, mistaking me for someone down on their luck and living on the streets. Well, when I think about it, that's exactly what I did look like. I was asleep, I did smell of alcohol, I had grubby skin, tatty, beer-stained clothes. Of course I looked like a gentleman of the road. Anyway, instead of leaving the station, I got my ticket out and boarded my train with pocketfuls of cash. So, I would like to seek forgiveness from those kind Dublin folk who spared me their change. Though in mitigation, and this is where I think we're going to trap Holly in compulsory forgiveness. In mitigation, I did make a donation of €20 to the Simon community when I got home in an attempt to clear my conscience.
Nice.
So my prediction, we're on tenterhooks here. My prediction is that even Holly is going to forgive this because nobody. He wasn't deliberate. He wasn't pretending to be homeless. He wasn't pretending. He just nodded off for all the medical reasons, and people had thought he was in need of a few euros, and they gave him a lot. But then he gave $20.
I think you're right. You know what? It's I'm going to forgive.
Wow.
And the reason
Well done,
is because he gave the money to charity. If he hadn't have done that act at the end, if he'd said, and I kept the money, now that would be an obvious absolute no. But he gave the money to charity in the end, and so really it was all good. And they wanted to give money to a homeless person. Obviously, he wasn't homeless. I mean, falling asleep on the steps of a train station it's a bit weird. I don't know why you would do that, and I get it was a stressful day, but maybe don't do that. But he gave money to charity, and we've got to encourage that.
So
that's
unless
why
he might have got €100, €100 in his cup. I suppose that'd be unlikely. €50 notes, that wouldn't be likely. So anyway, I think he's gained and he's given and
Yes.
he's learned, and
Yes.
we've all learned.
I think we have, haven't we? And the good people of Dublin as well, for dropping some money into his cup. I think we all feel nice and warm after that story, I think, which is what we could do with in these temperatures in January. So I'm going to definitely forgive. But the money to charity, well, I mean, frankly, I'd have forgiven him even if he hadn't given the money to charity, but that's just me.
If he kept it for himself.
Yeah, kept it for himself and blown it all on Guinness. So yes, I'm going to forgive.
Yeah, I did like the line about Dublin having a few places
Yes.
that were dark where you can
Good.
take on fluids. Anyways, the people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Mitch? Yes or no? I suspect you probably do, but 61054. First word is Simon. But just before the news, we had Mitch's confession about how he's having diabetes treatment and his skin was grubby because of that, and he was looking a bit tatty because he was not near home. He fell asleep on the steps of Connolly Station. Everyone thought he was homeless. Ended up giving him a whole stack of cash. He did give a whole lot of cash also to the
Yes, he
silent
did.
community.
Yeah.
So I suspect everyone is going to be very forgiving, but let's check it out.
100% forgiving tonight. Tim says, Mitch is absolutely forgiven. I have diabetes too and have those eye photographs, but my eye drops last 4 hours. Still messes up my day. Love the show. Sam says, forgiven. What a lovely, heartwarming story. They're so generous and Mitch did the right thing donating the money. And Elaine in Ireland says, absolutely forgive. The lovely people from my Emerald Isle where I live gave because they thought he was needing it, and it just proves how generous we are, and he did give the money to charity. I love that story.
Okay, that's very good. Thank you very much. If you have a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. The brand new all singing, all dancing podcast will land with you tomorrow at 4 o'clock.